He was about to lose everything: his buildings, his brand, even his name. In 1991, Donald Trump wasn't just bankrupt, he was broken. Over $3 billion in debt. His casinos were hemorrhaging cash. His airline had failed. His personal spending was out of control. And the bankers, they were circling. They forced him to sell the yacht, sell the airline, give up chunks of his empire just to keep the lights on. He was no longer a mogul, he was a mascot, a figurehead allowed to keep the title chairman while the real power, his lenders, ran the show behind closed doors. One newspaper at the time called it the art of the squeal. Donald Trump had become a punchline, and yet somehow he didn't go away. You're watching History. History they tried to erase, stories that must be told. New episodes right here on YouTube every Sunday and Wednesday. Like, subscribe, and become a member, please, to keep these stories alive. When we left off, Donald Trump had just returned from his first visit to Moscow in 1987. The Soviets had wined him, dined him, and watched him very closely. They even gave him a code name, Krasnov. And just as they predicted, Trump's ego would soon write checks his empire couldn't cash. At the time, he was riding high, plastering his name on buildings, tabloids, and book covers, but the biggest gamble of all was still to come: Atlantic City. Trump poured everything into his casino empire. He opened the Trump Plaza, then the Trump Castle, and finally the Trump Taj Mahal, a billion-dollar project built with borrowed money and bombastic promises. He called it the eighth wonder of the world. But behind the scenes, there were warning signs. Even Roy Cohn, Trump's ruthless mentor, the man who had taught him never to back down, told him, "Don't do it. Too much risk, too much debt." But Donald Trump didn't listen. And one by one, the dominoes fell. The Taj Mahal opened in 1990 and filed for bankruptcy just 1 year later. So did Trump Castle and Trump Plaza. 3 casinos, 3 bankruptcies, billions of dollars in debt. Trump had personally guaranteed over $800 million of it, and suddenly he couldn't pay. But it wasn't just Atlantic City. This was a collapse across every part of his brand. Trump Airlines, gone. Trump Vodka never took off. Trump Magazine launched and folded. The Trump Shuttle grounded. His prized yacht sold to pay creditors. Even his Manhattan real estate was under siege. It was like watching a golden empire implode in slow motion. And it wasn't private. The collapse was splashed across newspapers and late-night comedy shows. The punchlines, well, they wrote themselves. The man who once claimed to be the very definition of success had become its opposite. And the people who had once begged to work with him now wouldn't take his calls. Major banks, both American and European, cut ties. They didn't want the name Trump anywhere near their portfolios. And Donald Trump was furious. He felt abandoned, betrayed by the very system he believed he'd mastered. If the American banks wouldn't help him, he would find someone who would. And that's when the unthinkable happened. The banks took control of his empire, but left him the title. And they put him on an allowance, $450,000 a month. Now, to most working Americans, that would be unimaginable wealth. But for Trump, it was a very tight leash, a humiliating come down for the man who once bragged he could buy anything. He was allowed to keep his office in Trump Tower. His name stayed on the buildings, but only because the banks believed it still held some value. Behind the gold facade, Trump was powerless, no longer a mogul, just a figurehead. But then something strange started to happen. Despite everything, he didn't go away. Trump Tower somehow stayed his. The lifestyle didn't really change. And new Trump-branded real estate projects started popping up. Not in Manhattan, but around the world. Toronto, Panama, Baku, Batumi. And behind many of these deals was money. Foreign money. A lot of it. Often untraceable. The 24th floor of Trump Tower became a hub for shell companies, anonymous LLCs, and buyers who paid in all cash. No financing, no questions. And an alarming number of them were Russian. Not tourists, not expats, but men connected to oligarchs, to the mob, and in some cases directly to Russian intelligence. One man laundering money through Trump condos in Florida had been tied to the Semyon Mogilevich crime syndicate. That's the Russian mafia boss who was once on the FBI's most wanted list. Another buyer was a former mayor in Kazakhstan, accused of stealing billions and hiding it in U.S. properties, Trump-branded properties. But Trump wasn't asking questions. He was pocketing licensing fees, sometimes $1 million or more just for the use of his name. It was perfect. No risk, all reward. His name, gold-plated, oversized, loud, became the product. And just as all that foreign money was pouring in, Trump got on a plane and went back to Moscow. Not once, twice. We don't know everything about those trips. Details are scarce, and the people involved aren't talking. But we know they happened. He met with developers, toured potential sites, pitched a Trump Tower Moscow that, if built, would have been the tallest building in all of Europe. He wanted in. And the Russians, who had already learned how much he craved power, attention, and admiration, knew exactly how to keep him coming back. These weren't traditional investors. They were pipelines. People whose wealth and influence were directly tied to the same Kremlin that had once given him a code name. And as all of this unfolded in the 1990s and early 2000s, another figure was rising. Vladimir Putin, a former KGB officer who had watched his country collapse in humiliation. He had burned files in East Germany, watched the Berlin Wall fall, and vowed that Russia would never be embarrassed again. By 1999, Putin had taken over. By 2000, he was president. He didn't rebuild Russia with tanks and missiles. He used oligarchs, cash, and compromise. It was a different kind of war. And Donald Trump, a man still frozen out by Western banks, still desperate for money and relevance, fit the profile of someone useful. Eric Trump would later say, quote, "We have all the funding we need out of Russia." He even called it a disproportionate amount of our assets. By 2004, the comeback had begun in full. That year, a British producer named Mark Burnett, who had previously shopped reality shows in Russia, walked into Trump Tower with a pitch. A reality show, a fake boardroom, a reboot of the Trump brand. The Apprentice launched in January, and overnight, Trump was no longer a punchline. He was a boss, confident, decisive, powerful. What audiences didn't know was that the show was a facade. The boardroom wasn't real. The business wasn't real. And the man in the suit was still buried in debt. But the illusion worked. America bought it, and Trump sold it. He started licensing his name again. Condos, steaks, water, wine, and yes, even Trump University. And the foreign money, especially from the former Soviet sphere, kept flowing. But this time it wasn't Donald who returned to Moscow. It was his daughter. Ivanka Trump traveled to Russia and visited the Kremlin. She shook Vladimir Putin's hand, and according to Trump associate Felix Sater, she was invited to sit in Putin's chair, the seat of Russian power. She smiled, and though we've never seen the photo, the symbolism is unmistakable. Donald Trump had gone from the brink of financial extinction to the star of a hit TV reality show, and once again, a man with power. But the scaffolding behind that rise wasn't American banks, it wasn't Wall Street, it was shell companies, shadowy buyers, and a country that had once given him a code name, Krasnov, rebuilt by Russia and smiling from Putin's chair.
New episodes drop twice a week only on Heath Story. If you'd like to support the channel, subscribe now, leave a like and a comment, and become a member by clicking below.